Okay, good morning. So today we'll look into the evolution of the international economic system, and usually here we'll try to cover the questions on WTO, World Bank, as well as IMF. So let's look into a few questions and see that what content that we can generate in answering these questions. So again, here questions can be of two types. Certain times they can ask certain questions which are based on current affairs. In that sense, like India stand in WTO about respect to what is that uh, vaccine patent exemptions which they waiver they asked. But again, no matter what current affairs question they ask, holistically the connecting point will be always to one thing: India stand in WTO or IMF or World Bank. So when you look from a broad conceptual point of view, India represents the global south, and obviously any Indian stand will be in favor of global south. So many times when you can look at foreign policy also, when we say a country's foreign policy is also a reflection of its economic structure or social structure. So basically if you take India as a country, we have one of the largest people below poverty line, or you can say India is largely an agrarian based society, and you can say in India also is a country which has been colonized. So this background will always have an impact on India's global standing in WTO or in IMF as well as World Bank. And you can also link concepts such as the Marxist perspective, usually which is critical of these institutions. So you have Emmanuel Wallerstein, who speaks about the world systems approach, A.G. Frank, who speaks about dependency theory. But you have some who defend these things, especially of people like Jagadish Bhagawati, who says that the loans given by IMF and World Bank has enabled the developing countries to come out of poverty, etc. But you have people like Joseph Stiglitz, who is critical of these institutions because these institutions are based on Washington consensus, and Washington consensus was based on the neoliberal economic philosophy. And Joseph Stiglitz has written this book called as Globalization and its Discontent, where he says even in the developed world, the globalization has not favored the working class. And he says there is increasing social movements, etc. And he calls for what? A post-Washington consensus. Means largely it is mooting for a welfare model of state, or what we call social liberalism. So for example, he recommends for the Nordic model, where there is a free market economy, but again the state will play a key role in order to ensuring there is any kind of impact on the free market economy is nullified. So these are the framework that you will have to know in order to approach your answer writing. Without knowing this framework, if you just go to write the answers, your answer will not, what you can say, get a direction or a structure in that regard. And many times this understanding is more important than just reading new content, etc. If you take any Indian stand, it will be backed by these factors at play. Now based on this, let us look at few questions which they have asked in previous year. So one, let us take a very recent question only, because here it is also covering part B, it's not separate, India and WTO, etc. Okay. So in 2021, they've asked a question. Explain India's position. Explain India's position on the waiver on the waiver of intellectual property rights on COVID-19 vaccines in WTO. So this was asked for 10 marks, 150 words. So how will you approach this question? So they asked, explain India's position on the waiver of intellectual property rights on COVID vaccines in WTO. So how will you approach this question? So what will be your introduction? Yes, online students can also just pitch in. Like what you can write as an introduction, you have to write within 150 words. You have to write about India's position in on this COVID waiver in WTO. That's what will be the context? Why will you go dispute between countries? Question is saying explain India's position on the waiver of intellectual property rights on COVID-19 in WTO. Why will you go in agrarian and all? Simple, you have to write about COVID-19 was a non-traditional security threat which impacted the world at large, and we say growth of nationalism and protectionism as a byproduct of what? COVID-19's impact. So write something regarding COVID-19. So what was the impact of COVID-19 on the world? Then you come into saying that India and South Africa together, they put forward for what? The waiver for the intellectual property rights on COVID vaccines. Now question is why? You need to explain why or what is India's position. So you have told India's position, India is asking for a waiver. Why is India asking for a waiver? What are the reasons brought by the Indian government? If you have read newspaper at that point of time, or even think you know what is India's position, or even if you know what India's social economic background, or India as a leader of global south. So what was the arguments brought by the Indian government saying that why they are seeking this waiver on vaccines? So one, you can have some specific points. You can say the Indian government said the pandemic had disrupted the lives of the poorest of the poor in developing societies. Secondly, India also argued that only 14% of low income countries, only 14% of low income countries have access to vaccination. Thirdly, India viewed COVID-19, it should not be means what? It should not lead to profit making in that regard. There should be a humanitarian approach, especially by the pharmaceutical companies from the global north, especially these companies such as Pfizer, BioNTech, Moderna, who are making around 65,000 US dollars per minute, and these companies, their total vaccine supply to low income countries, it is less than 1%. Is less than 1%. Fourthly, India argued that COVID has to be seen as what? It's a security threat to human lives. And here, countries will have to work together. Cooperate. And it is the duties of the states to ensure the protection of the lives of the vulnerable sections. And hence India said that the private companies as well as the states, especially global north and global south, should work together in enhancing the vaccine production, ensuring the global supply chains are not choked. And in this regard, India itself has projected its leadership qualities under its Vaccine Maitri initiative. Where it has supplied vaccines to the developing and underdeveloped societies. And then you can say the India's position at WTO shows its today to become a leading power to protect the interests of the global south. So basically in this question you have to explain that, yeah, Shivani, you can say that poverty anywhere is a threat everywhere, or unvaccinated population anywhere is a threat to everywhere, especially in a world which is a cobweb world order. So in these kind of questions you have to know more apt what is the introduction you are going to use, what is the introduction you can think. So yeah, Shivani Watts has given one point. Here it should be based on cosmopolitanism rather than narrow nationalism. So you can bring that keyword in your answer. So this should have been your answer or approach to writing this question. So that's what I told. In most of the question you need not know details of the current affairs, but at least you have to have a broader understanding that India's position is backed by what. So every country's foreign policy is backed by its domestic needs, and also India being a leader of the global south, projecting itself to be a leader of the global south. So India along with South Africa had petitioned for a waiver on the COVID-19 vaccine. So it's a very straightforward question what they had asked. explain the position on the waiver of intellectual property rights on COVID-19 vaccine. However, India's position was opposed from some developed countries like Switzerland, etc., saying that this will compromise on the intellectual property rights, innovations and inventions. But India's argument was that innovations and inventions should be for human development, it should be not for profit making. So basically this is the idea that you need to bring in your answer. So question is very simple, but again you will have to, again it depends upon how well you articulate, and a quality of a good answer is how well you simplify. And that is what we say, when you look at the question, you also have to know what should be a suitable introduction. So within 150 words, you cannot write about India being an agrarian country. There is no connection between that and the question. Why will you write India as an agrarian country? How that is got to stand with India's WTO stand? If there is some question on agreement on agriculture, then you can say India being an agrarian country where 48% of the population is dependent on agriculture. That is a different thing. So this question has nothing to do with agriculture. So basically India's stand reflects, one, its leadership qualities, second one, it concerns for the vulnerable sections, third one, India also sees the world view, its world order, that what it should be a cosmopolitan world order, not through the narrow lens of parochial nationalism. Okay, India did not need waiver for her interest because it had already developed rather than was concern of rules. Yeah, that you can. But largely within 150 words, you see how much you can write, because you cannot write every point. Okay, you have to more or so able to answer the demand of the question. Now let us look into one more question on this IMF or etc. Okay, so take down this question: how rising powers, how are the rising powers challenging USA and the Western dominance, dominance in IMF and World Bank. In IMF and World Bank. So 2019. So this question was asked for 20 marks. How are the rising powers challenging the US and Western dominance in IMF and World Bank? So how will you address this question? And first of all, what is the demand of the question here? What are the keywords in the question that you have to note down? Okay, so who are the rising powers? Okay, then what is the other keyword? No, it is the Western dominance in IMF and World Bank. So how are Americans or the Europeans dominating the World Bank, or what is their dominance in the World Bank? What is the keyword you are missing here? So one, you have to say both of them are now keywords. Britain, Wood brothers, they are out of this conference, and largely they are also called as what? The European banks or the Anglo-Saxon banks. Then you have to say these what you can say, in 1970s, John Williamson came out with what? The Washington Consensus. And Washington Consensus is based on the neoliberal philosophy. And these are the two guiding principles, or this is the guiding principle of both the IMF as well as the World Bank. So one, you can say the ideological dominance from where it comes. Second one, you have to say about the structure of IMF and World Bank, because they are not democratic. They are based on giving more voting power to those countries which contribute more. So here you can say in IMF alone, the Americans have 17% voting share, and for any kind of majority decision in IMF, it requires 85%. So obviously, America is literally as a veto, and America and Europe, since their economic philosophies is similar, they've come together in terms of what you can speak about conditional loans, which are provided, opening up of the market of the developing societies. Thirdly, you can say that the presidents of the IMF has been always an European. The president of World Bank has been always an American. So in one, because it's a 20 marker question, you cannot just write in 2 words. First you have to write one paragraph explaining how there is Western dominance in that regard. So here you have to bring the keywords in that regard. You can also speak about the Marxist approach, where the Immanuel Wallerstein or even Joseph Stiglitz in that regard, he is critical of these banks, that how they are only working in the interest of the rich within the global north. So one part of the answer you explain in your answer, saying where and how do you see the Western dominance. So the keyword should be there in your answer: Washington consensus, John Williamson, the Marxist approach of explaining things. Then you have to come into the order, saying that, however, this the the these banks, and you can say the idea of a neoliberal world order, also provided opportunities for the globalization. It also benefited what you call the semi-periphery countries such as India and China, and you can say over the time the economies of these countries started performing well. So now you come to the rising powers: India, China, and you can say, or BRICS, what you can call. Now you go writing about how these countries are trying to challenge IMF and World Bank. So obviously, one, you'll write about the establishment of the new development bank, and you also have to say that what is the new development bank structure. For example, here it is not based on hierarchical, it is based more on egalitarian order. Even though China is the largest contributor, all countries have one vote. All countries have one vote. Similarly, in a new development bank, they are offering non-conditional loans. So what do you mean by non-conditional loans? That there is no preconditions that is required. So there is more autonomy with respect to the economic choices they can make. Similarly, they have also established, especially China is also leading in challenging the Western hegemony, where they have established AIIB, that is Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. And here again you can say they are offering loans to the countries. Okay, and Amit Jadhav, shift from multilateralism to pluralism. So you can say now, you can also say countries like India and China have come together on these platforms. They are demanding what? Greater voting share or greater quota within the World Bank. So one, you can say after the 2008 financial crisis, the 2009, the rising powers, they proposed transferring 7% of the IMF quota from the developed countries to what? The emerging economies in that regard. And now you can say China has also projected a new model of development which is alternative to the Washington consensus, which is called as the Beijing consensus, which speaks about what? A state controlled capitalistic model, a state controlled capitalistic model, and where state will play a very key role in that regard. Inclusion of environmental issues in trade aspects of harming third world countries. See, if you look at the question is not asking about WTO. The question is only asking about how the rising powers are challenging US and Western dominance in IMF and World Bank. So, Shivani, why will you write about the WTO? It's not about WTO. Thirdly, you can speak about de-dollarization. Now, groups such as BRICS, which have been formed, they are looking for what? To reduce their dependence on dollars in that regard. Okay, so don't write about environmental issues in trade aspects, because that is not part of the demand of the question. Is asking that how they are challenging World Bank and IMF. And you can also see that because of the rising economic capacity of the rising powers like India and China, they are also offering cheaper means of lines of credit. For example, India has offered lines of credit to Sri Lanka, to African countries in that regard. Similarly, China, through its BRI project, has been able to give more economic loans to many of the third world countries, and reducing their dependence on the Western banks and diversifying the options for these countries to take loans, and especially non-conditional loans. But then you can say, however, nevertheless, the alternatives what are there, such as the BRICS Bank or AIB, they cannot be alternative to IMF and World Bank, because IMF and World Bank's corpus is much greater than these two banks. And second one, you can say there is also concerns about China's BRI project, where they have results of what, debt trap in that regard, and growing divergence between India and China on border issues also to a certain extent has weakened, what you can say, BRICS. But nevertheless, we can say if developing countries are able to work together, and again you can say platforms such as NAM is reinvented, it will be able to for them to establish a new international economic order, especially when the Western countries themselves have now debunked on Washington consensus and they've moved towards Cornwall consensus. So when you go through the question, try to focus on the demand of the question, don't deviate away from the demand of the question. So don't try to write something about WTO, etc. Try to remain. So that's why for 20 marks, how do you explain? First you explain what is the Bretton Woods conference, then you have to explain about the Bretton Woods brothers, then you have to explain about how there is Western dominance in these banks. There you can use of Marxist approach, etc. to explain. Then you will have to explain how the rising powers, how globalization also benefited developing countries. So who are these rising powers? That should be there in your answer. Then you go about telling how these rising powers are challenging. But again you can say the challenge is there, but again there is also issues with the rising powers. And then you try to conclude your answer by saying that if they are able to come together and they can make the world order, economic world order, more equitable and more fair. Something like that you can write. So any doubt with respect to this question? So that's why it's very important that you break down the question correctly, try to understand what is the demand of the question they are asking, then you can will be able to easily answer. And for most of the questions the format remains the same, but just you need to re-alter it. Take one more question they've asked on these areas in recent years is that the IMF, World Bank, G7, GATT. So in the previous question, if you also want to add how they are challenged to economic dominance, you can say G20 formation of G20 is an example that today developing countries are playing a greater role in economy, because G7 is losing its significance, G20 is running, and Africa being brought into G20. Again, you can say the strength or the voice of the global south countries are becoming more predominant. GATT and other structures and other structures and other structures are designed to serve the interests of transnational companies, banks, investment firms and investment firms in a new imperial age. In a new imperial age. Substantiate with examples. Substantiate with examples. Of governance of the new world order. Of the governance of new world order. Substantiate with examples of the governance in a new world order. So how will you approach this particular question? What is your approach to answering this question? Because the question might be a bit huge, but still it can be easily answered if you are able to understand the demand. So the IMF, World Bank, G7, GATT, they are telling these are structures designed to serve the interest of transnational companies, banks, investment firms in a new imperial age. So basically they are speaking about neo-imperialism, neocolonialism. They are asking you to substantiate your answer. So here if you look at basically this statement usually comes from whom? Basically it will be a Marxist approach. Because it is a Marxist who will criticize these institutions are reflection of the capitalist class from the global north. They are asking. So obviously, how will you start your answer? What will be your introduction? What will be your introduction? Because they are asking you to substantiate. 20 marks. How will you start your answer? How will you write? What can be the points you can generate? Online students. But what will you start as your introduction? What will be the introduction that you can write? So again go back to the question, if you understand the question. IMF, World Bank, G7, GATT are the structures that are designed to serve the interest of transnational companies, banks, investment firms in a new imperial age. Substantiate the governance of the new world order with suitable examples, they are asking. So they are saying I did not understand the last part of the question. The last part of the question is nothing but they are asking you to explain the above statement. So first of all, who has made this statement? It's a Marxist approach to the statement. So obviously they are asking to explain that statement. So you have to, in your answer, you have to explain through examples how IMF or World Bank or WTO, they have consistently worked in favor of promoting the interest of the multinational companies or the capitalist class from the global north. So that you need to give through example. For example, you can say how after this establishment of Washington Consensus or the establishment of these institutions, you can say exploitation of the global south countries have continued. How? You need to explain. So one, you can say establishment of GATT. Now they promoted what? Free trade. What do you mean by free trade? Opening up of the economies to investors. So obviously this free trade has benefited whom? The global north countries. How? They've converted the global south countries as to use raw materials and as a market. And you can give example of Walmart, whose annual revenue is more than the GDP of many African countries. So because of this free trade also, now many polluting industries have shifted their bases into uh, Africa, Latin America, or you can say because of these investments in that regard, the sovereignty of the economic global south countries have been weakened, and now they are weakening their labor laws, etc. And this has led to labor exploitation, especially in the third world countries. For example, you can say sweatshops in Bangladesh, or then you can also speak about the IMF and World Bank. They are only giving the loans on what basis? Conditional loans. And most of these conditions are based on what? Most of these conditions are based on reducing the subsidies, opening up of FDI. So how this has impacted? Because the opening of whom it has benefited, it has given market space for the global north. So the companies or the domestic companies, they are not able to compete. So this has led to what? Their collapse. Unemployment has risen in that regard. And you can say some feminist scholars have also criticized, saying that this has led to feminization of poverty in the third world countries. So like exploitation of women has happened. For example, you can say Thailand emerging as a sex tourism place. And you can also say um, that what? That how these structures have been framed, because in these structures, all IMF, World Bank, GATT, they're all exclusionary in nature. Why they're exclusionary in nature? For example, in all of this thing, what, especially in IMF and World Bank, the global south countries do not have voting powers. They do not have a larger say, and it is the America and the Europeans who dominate these banks in that regard. So you have Joseph Stiglitz, who have highlighted the Argentina crisis, the East Asian economic crisis. These were all a prescribed disaster by the IMF and World Bank because they followed one size fits all approach. So here you can add the view of this Joseph Stiglitz in that regard. So you can take this viewpoint, you can take down. So take on Joseph Stiglitz in his book Globalization and its Discontent. Globalization and its Discontent has mentioned that the prescription by IMF prescription by IMF prescription by IMF prescription by IMF has led to economic crisis, has led to the economic crisis. Example, the Argentina economic crisis, East Asian crisis, and the imposing terms of IMF, has prevented Russia from turning into a market economy, has prevented Russia from turning into a market economy. One more viewpoint you can take down. Jagger argues that the TRIPS provisions under WTO, that is protection of intellectual property rights, has favored the multinational pharmaceutical companies from global north. Favored multinational companies, pharmaceutical companies from global north. and it has impacted the accessibility and affordability. It has impacted the accessibility and the affordability, of the poorest of the poor in global south, poorest of the poor in the global south, global south. And then you can also take down Noam Chomsky. Noam Chomsky means these are all unstructured. You have to use it in your answer in a structured way, but these are all value addition. Noam Chomsky, in his recent documentary, Noam Chomsky, in his recent documentary, The Requiem of the American Dream, Noam Chomsky, in the recent documentary, The Requiem of the American Dream, has said these structures are designed, I mean these structure means again IMF, World Bank, our structures are designed to protect investor rights, to protect investor rights, to protect investor rights and not general population at large, and not general population at large. And they have been designed to ensure concentration of power, have been designed to ensure the concentration of power with the capitalist class, concentration of power with the capitalist class in the global north, in the global north. Global north. So these are certain content you can use, but you have to give examples in your answer that how IMF, World Bank, transnational companies. So here the Marxist approach in that regard, these are nothing but tools of the capitalist class from the global north to extract. So how neo-imperialism is happening. So give example of exploitation in Africa, exploitation in countries like labor exploitation in countries like Bangladesh, India. Also give example of how there is polluting industries are shifting from global north to global south. How in these structures they are not democratic in that regard. Why? Because the global south countries do not have economic voting power. But then towards the end you can recommend that how global south countries, or what you read that time, how they are trying to challenge the IMF, World Bank. Write 1 or 2 points there and then you try to conclude your answer. So when you read a question, it is very important to understand from what context that statement has been made. And here they are asking you to substantiate. Substantiate means you have to explain and prove that how this is happening, and with what? With examples. So basically when you start your answer, introduction, you can start your introduction saying that the neoliberal economic order is dominated by, began with the establishment of IMF, World Bank, and these are all institutions based on the neoliberal philosophy, or what we call Washington consensus. Explain a bit what is Washington consensus, then go on to explain that how, what the Marxist viewpoint like Immanuel Wallerstein, A.G. Frank, how they explained that these institutions, or you can make use of Stiglitz also, where he also explains that how policy prescription by IMF has led to economic crisis, how it has led to exploitation of the weaker section or vulnerable section within the developing societies. And you have Noam Chomsky says it is not only the developing societies, even the developed world, the working class, they have been also impacted. So these institutions are designed for meeting the interest of the capitalist class, and they will also ensure the political power has remained with these classes in that regard. Then you need to recommend regarding what changes should be made or what can be made. So that should be the structure of your answer, what you are going to write here. So you have to give examples how and why it is happening that way. And that is why these NAM countries had come out with what? New international economic order. Okay, because these structures means what? There is a idea, neoliberalism is a ideology. To implement this ideology, you need structures. These are the structures which are there, and how these structures are functioning. Because of their functioning, how it is impacting the global south. That you need to give examples and explain. So these structures are designed to favor multinational companies. The banks, why banks? Because it is the super rich in the Western countries who control this investment bank or investors, right? So that is why that Noam Chomsky's slot that these agreements have been signed to protect the interest of the investor rights. They are not designed to protect the interest of the population at large. So that you have to be able to bring it in your answer. So if you see most of the questions which are there in these areas, they are mainly asking this way. So again you can say one more question. Explain the role of non-state actors like IMF, World Bank, European Union, MNCs in modulating and transforming broad dynamics of international relations. Again I repeat, explain the role of non-state actors like IMF, World Bank, European Union and MNCs in modulating and transforming the broad dynamics of international relations. So here the answer is that you have to say that starting of your answer for international politics is a very new discipline and it was dominated by realist school of thought for an early time period. The world order worked under the Westphalian world order where only state actors were primary. But you can say with emergence of liberalism and you can say with decline of Soviet Union, now the world order shift towards what? The cobweb model given by John Burton. Now you need to explain how these non-state actors like IMF, World Bank, they transform the dynamics of international relations. So you need to explain here, one, how these institutions promoted global integration, how these institutions also ensure that states are not the primary actors, how these institutions also ensured that the development of transnational companies or multinational companies in that regard. And today you can say there is growing interdependence between countries. So you can take about WTO, how it has brought. But at the same time, you can also bring the Marxist viewpoint and try to explain that here, that how they have negatively changed the dynamics. So for example, now they have ensured that there is continued exploitation, there is continued transfer of wealth from the global south to global north. So you need to bring two perspectives here. One perspective about this complex interdependence, cobweb model. The other perspective of the Marxist perspective about what they say, it has led to what? The dependency theory, or what is it? The world systems theory, how the exploitation is happening, how it has become new channels for exploiting wealth. So that should have been written in your answer. So every question you will have to look at the question to understand what will be your approach of writing. So for every question you cannot use the same approach. So for this question, if you clearly see, they are saying that what? Explain the role of non-state actors like IMF, World Bank, European Union, MNCs in modulating and transforming broad dynamics of international relations. So first you will have to tell what was the dynamics of international relations before the emergence of liberalism. Now with the emergence of liberalism and these institutions in that regard, how the dynamics of international relations has changed. Now non-traditional security threats have become important. Now economics is more important than geopolitics. Geoeconomics has become important. Third one, the role of non-state actors has become important. Fourth one, now these has led to what? Promotion of trade between countries. So this has developed into complex interdependence which are there. But again, you can say the Marxist approach has said that it has also led to neo-imperialism. So that you will have to be able to bring it in an answer. But again, the challenge will be always that how do you structure your answer and how you systematically write. So first part of your answer you have to write about how the structure was and how now they've changed the structure. Like European Union works on functionalist approach. They'll give more focus on low politics rather than giving focus on high politics. So these are the things that you'll have to write. Again, you can say how has geoeconomics replaced geopolitics in the present international scenario. So again, first to tell what is geopolitics, why geopolitics was predominant during the Westphalian order, and then breakdown of the Westphalian order, how geoeconomics has become important, rise of multinational companies, rise of non-state actors, transnational companies, international NGOs. That you need to agree. So if you see most of the questions which are there, they are asking on these lines. Basically, it is being asked on the lines of relation between global north and global south, mainly about these institutions. So a broad understanding, you have to know 2 or 3 perspectives. One is the Marxist perspective, the other is the liberal perspective, the other is the realist perspective, then you can have a feminist perspective. To just take a point of feminist perspective, value addition, notes you take down, because they can ask a question saying that what is the impact of globalization on women in third world countries, or globalization and feminism. So first you take down, globalization refers to, because when you read about globalization, you have to not look at globalization only through economic lens. Globalization has political, technological, economical, social, cultural lens. Globalization refers to economic, social, cultural. Globalization refers to economic, social, cultural and political process of integration. Globalization refers to economic, social, cultural and political process of integration. Then you take down economic globalization. Economic globalization. Economic globalization refers to, it refers to the global economic integration that happened in 20th century. It refers to global economic integration. Global economic integration that happened in 20th century. So when we say economic globalization or economic integration, what are the key structures that will come to your mind? It is World Bank, IMF and WTO. And how they brought economic integration? One, WTO's insistence on free trade, IMF and World Bank providing conditional loans, opening up the economy. So all these were based on the principle of what? Washington Consensus. And who coined the term Washington Consensus? John Williamson. John Williamson. Then you will have to know what are the core features of neoliberal economic policies. Means these institutions work on neoliberal. So you take down the core features. Core features of neoliberal economic policies. One is trade liberalization. Trade liberalization. Second is deregulation. Second is deregulation. Third is privatization. Fourth is elimination of social welfare. Elimination of social welfare. Elimination of social welfare. Fifth, restrictions on immigration. Restrictions on immigration. Restrictions on immigration. Now this is a broad idea of what we can say of this economic what is that, globalization. These are the features of it. Now if you look at the feminist approach here, that how do feminists see economic globalization. So take down, feminists say that, the feminists argue that globalization has benefited the world's wealthiest. So this is an interesting viewpoint they say. They say there is no use of dividing this world into global north and global south. Why? Because globalization has benefited the wealthiest both in global north and global south. Okay. Yeah, so you know, it has benefited the world's wealthiest in both global north and global south. It has benefited the wealthiest in both global north and global south. Hence, this north-south divide is futile. Hence, this global north-south divide, for them, it is futile. And when you say who are the wealthiest in global north and south, they say it is largely the men who have benefited. It is largely the men who have benefited. And this scholar called as Jagar, he says globalization has led to feminization of poverty. Has led to feminization of poverty, especially in the global south. Feminization of poverty in global south. So obviously, you again connect back the globalization led by neoliberal philosophy led to what? It led to state ending its social welfare functions. So this has impacted more number of women. So take note, the destruction of publicly owned natural resources, the destruction of publicly owned natural resources has led to increased burden on women, has led to increased burden on women, And what is the other impact? Because now these policies are all neoliberal policies. So neoliberal policies leads to commodification of environment, and destruction of environment has greater impact on women. For example, the water crisis puts more burden on women to fetch water from long distances in Africa and Asia. So take note, the neoliberal policies also led to commodification of environment, This has increased the burden on women. Example, water crisis. In Africa and India. Water crisis in Africa and India has led to women traveling longer distances to fetch water. So this is one on the what you can see, economic impact of globalization. Then there is something also called as political globalization. Next to take down. Political globalization refers to changes. Political globalization refers to changes in exercise of political power. So obviously, before this neoliberal world order came, or this liberal world order came, what type of world order was there? The Westphalian world order. So what were the features of the Westphalian world order? So take note, prior to liberal world order, there was Westphalian world order. Prior to liberal world order, there was Westphalian world order. And what was the characteristics? Power was exercised through territorial state. Second one, sovereignty of states, sovereignty of the state. Third one, international treaties were covenant without swords, nothing but words. Nothing but words. Now, how this changed with emergence of this political globalization? One, now world order became polycentric. World order became polycentric. Non-state actors became important. Non-state actors became important. Third, supranational organizations became predominant. Now, this is what political globalization. Now, what is the feminist view here is that they say emergence of these institutions have not in any way led to women empowerment, because most of these institutions are dominated by men. So, take down. However, many feminist scholars argue that in the new world order, the supranational institutions, in the new world order, the supranational institutions have very limited success, in protecting women, and have structural inequalities. So, for example, if you say currently, after the first time I think in WTO's history, for the first time you have a black woman who is heading it, that is Onkoja Iwala. But most of the institutions, like UN itself, you see, UN does not have a woman head till today. Or the number of judges in ICJ are also largely dominated by men. The WTO head is also again a man. World Bank, IMF, etc. So, their argument are that these institutions are patriarchal. So, then you take down, some feminists also believe that the expansion of global communications, What do you mean by global communications? Internet, Facebook, WhatsApp, etc. Global communication has led to development of new transnational political networks. So, these kind of keywords are important when you use in your, has led to development of what? New transnational political networks. Which is often referred to as the global civil society. Means some feminists, what they say, that this emergence of this global communication and new transnational political networks, the civil society, has some way benefited the women, has provided women and other vulnerable sections, some effective means to resist inequalities. So, you can give example here of rise of Me Too movement, or you can also give examples of ecofeminism in that regard, Greta Thunberg and her movement in that regard. So, in a way, it has led to some kind of voice to the voiceless. But other feminists believe that globalization means these communication channels what are there, they've also led to dark web, which has been also source for exploitation against women, such as sexual slavery, and what is that one more word we say for online founding women, what they say, what is it? Huh? Not dating apps. Using in online when you, this is a particular word for it. Not yes. Forgot that. What if there is, if anybody has read this internal security and all, you have. Pornography is there. One you can say it has also led to development of pornography. Cyber bullying or cyber, what do you call it as? Cyber stalking. Like cyber stalking. Okay, deep fake also you can add. Then you can bring one more angle with globalization. This is from the post-colonial feminists. They say globalization, which has empowered women movements and all, they say it has only empowered the women movements through Eurocentric approach. It lacks intersectionality. So take note. The post-colonial feminists, post-colonial feminists such as Chandra Mohanty, and Uma Chakravarti argue that studies by Martha Nussbaum, and Susan Molar-Okin, who are considered as international feminists, only focus on the women lives in the global north, and they're more Eurocentric in approach. And they don't take into account the lives of women or the experiences of women in global south. They don't take into account the experiences of women in global south. So this is one thing you can keep it in your notes, saying that globalization and feminism in that regard, or feminist viewpoint with respect to how IMF, World Bank, because globalization and IMF and World Bank can be interlinked. So these are the ideas you need to have, but these are all not structured nodes. You will have to know when to use them, where to use them, depending upon what is the question they have asked. So the advantage of political science has been always that the questions will come broad. If you are very good in analysis in that regard, it's very easy to score well. But if you are only good with respect to remembering the scholar's name and just writing them without understanding under what context the question has been asked, then you can say your scores won't go up, or your answers will be highly inorganic in nature, and it won't naturally connect to the demand of the question. And that's why I told these can help to get an idea, but it depends upon again what is the question they have asked. So for example, I can use this same content when they have given something like post-colonial feminism. So obviously tell who are post-colonial feminists, what are their arguments. Same thing I can write about Chandra Mohanty and Uma Chakravarti. Or they might have asked about feminism in international politics comment. So obviously then I will tell what is feminism in international, it's a critical theory. I'll write about J. Ann Tickner, her modification of Hans Morganthaw, Cynthia Enlow, Catherine Moon. I will explain what is the role. But then I will also argue about there is also criticism within the feminist approach that it is biased. That there then I bring out the post-colonial feminists. So the content always remains the same. It depends upon how do you use the content, where do you use the content depending upon the question. And that's why I told for a good answer writing skill, the first step is always your ability to decipher the question correctly. If you are able to decipher the question correctly, then you are able to organically link your points in a systematic way. Then the structure of your answer will stand out. You are able to structure your answer. You will be able to write good introduction. See, introduction and conclusion can be all pre-prepared. You will change it according to what is the demand of the question they have asked. So that is always more important. Understood? Now let's go into some other areas where the questions have come, like this democracy, terrorism, gender justice at global level. That is one of the last topic what you have in the syllabus. So here let us take some questions which have come in the exam and let us look to how to answer this question. Yeah, same human trafficking, etc. I don't know, that is cyber stalking. Human trafficking is real. Human trafficking is what they push people into prostitution, etc. Okay, let's take down some questions on this democracy, global concerns in that regard. Okay, so take down this question, which is asked in 2019. Is democracy promotion in developing countries a feasible idea? Is democracy promotion in developing countries in developing countries a feasible idea? So this was asked in 2019, it was asked for 15 months. Now yeah, so first identify the demand of the question, then you will be able to think what you can write. What exactly they are asking you? So what is the demand of? So okay, Shivani says that J.S. Mill's view on democracy is same as his statement. No, it's not same as his statement. They are asking you your opinion. Is democracy promotion in developing countries a feasible idea? So first for this, more important is that how do you structure your answer? Hmm. 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 See, one year going back to USSR disintegration, why that is all required? That is not required. That is too much of background, what you can say. What about other online students? Why you are going into the USSR democracy happened? Why that is required? Question is asking, is democracy promotion in developing countries a feasible idea? Feasible idea means what? Okay, is it a practical idea? Is it possible? So here two things you have to know. You have to know what is democracy promotion, first of all. Or even before that, why do you want to promote democracy in developing countries? Right now. So what will be the right way to start the answer with? Online students, if any are there, any idea what you can link? Have you heard about this theory called as given by Michael Doyle? Democratic peace theory. So what does the theory say? Hmm? What does the theory say? Hmm? If you promote democracies, if there is democracy introduced in many countries, the world will be more peaceful. Two democratic countries won't go to war. So in this regard, you can say the idea of promoting democracies in third world or developing societies on the idea that it is going to reduce the disputes, etc., is the main thing why they are speaking about democracy promotion in developing societies. However, democracy promotion in developing societies, first feasible idea. So you can need to divide your answer by saying pros and cons or challenges and cons. So one, you have people like J.S. Mill who have brought the argument that democracy cannot be introduced in all kinds of societies, especially where people are not civilized. If there are barbarians, democracy cannot survive. Secondly, you can say the post-colonial viewpoint, where you have certain people saying that democracy promotion, it is more of a means to bring regime changes rather than the end itself, and it has backfired. Like for example, democracy at gunpoint, Afghanistan, Iraq. Here you can say democracy collapsed. Why it collapsed? Because it did not have strong institutions to promote. Third, you can also say Samuel Huntington, who speaks about to bring democracy into third world countries, first of all, there have to be development of strong institutions. If institutions are there, then the democracy will survive. Otherwise, it will create greater problems, civil war, or you can say America's attempt to promote democracy in Iraq gave space for rise of ISIS. Then you have people like Liu Kuan Yew who have brought the argument that democracy is incompatible with the Asian values or in Asian societies. But however, Amartya Sen has brought a counter idea saying that this is an extreme argument because democracy is compatible with developing societies. For example, in India, he says that democracy is not something which is Western idea. Democracy has already existed in the Indian minds from ages. Sabha, Samiti, Vidhata. And India is an example of a country where democracy has survived and sustained. But nevertheless, democracy should not be imposed upon, and especially the liberal democracy is not the only model of democracy. Every country should be able to evolve its own model of democracy, and for that there should be first promotion of democratic culture. Then there has to be strong institutions in that regard. Only then democracy will stabilize in developing world. So here the question is not yes or no. The question is about you have to bring the flow in your answer. by linking these concepts, saying that what are the negative outcomes when democracy has been forcefully enforced. You have to give examples here, Iraq, Afghanistan. You also have to give example of India in that regard, why democracy has been successful here. And then you conclude your answer by saying that democracy should not be imposed, democracy should come from the people themselves. And for that, there should be existence of democratic culture, or what as Samuel Huntington also spoke about, strong institutions needs to be built. And there should be not only one model of democracy, every country can have its own model of democracy given its socio-economic context. So that is what you can write in your answer. So here you need to bring that organic flow. It's not that I forcefully link theories or it is an organic flow. That is my argument, what I am bringing. And for that you can give examples. You can give examples that why in Africa now there is military coup, why in Myanmar, or the question is largely asked on that. So this year also you can see in current affairs African coup is there. Similar. Now same question, let us turn around and see, because the question, the syllabus says what? Contemporary global issues. They have given democracy, terrorism, nuclear proliferation, etc., climate change, etc. So here and all you can't sit and prepare. You can just go with the crude way. So let us think now, since African countries, especially the Sahel region, which is there, you can say there is increased military coup. Burkina Faso, Niger, okay, Mali. Now they will ask a question saying that critically examine the reasons for collapse of democracy in the Sahel region of Africa and rise of the military rule. Let us think they asked you for 15 marks, 250 words in this exam. Okay. So this is for 15 marks. I'll give you 12 minutes to write the answer. Now concepts I have told, but you have to be able to write the answer. It's your wish how you write. Yeah, you have to have some basic idea. If you have read newspaper, you'll know. But let us think, what will you write? So your time starts now. It is 11:05. By 11:17, you will have to stop. In 17 minutes, you have to write. Last 7 minutes. Last 3 minutes. Last 2 minutes. Last 60 seconds. Time is up. So yeah, time is up. Even the online students can stop writing. So question was what critically examine the reasons for collapse of democracy in the Sahel region of Africa and the rise of military dictators. So obviously the question is on the contemporary thing. Why there is a so here in introduction you can start with current affairs by saying that in recently 7 to 8 African countries, especially in the Sahel region, such as Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, they collapsed and there was rise of military dictators or military coup. Now, the uh, this shows that what? This shows that the democratization of the African continent has not yet completely a finished project. And the reasons for the collapse of democratic regimes in Africa, you have to go one by one point, what you can say. So what is one major reason? So one major reason is that the lack of legitimacy to the democratic governments. For example, governments in Mali, etc., faced high or large level of corruption in that regard, and that is why people rose in revolt. And now the military dictators who promised to eradicate corruption were more, what you can say, favorable in the eyes of the people. Second, you can say weak institutionalization. So as Samuel Huntington had said, that stronger institutions are needed for democracy to success. Well, in most of these African society, the weak institutions, such as there was no strong judiciary or an independent agency, hence this led to the collapse of the democracies. Third, had as Aristotle very long back had indicated that any form of inequality can be a root cause of revolution. And if you see at these African societies where the collapse has happened, there was growing inequality and people wanted to overthrow the current democratic governments because they were not feeling the benefits of the democracy's dividends in that regard. Why looking at plain and simple, na? Not necessary. Hannah Arendt spoke about something. She spoke about ideology. Here, question is not about ideology. Here, the question is that there are socio-economic causes. There is growing inequality within these African societies. The rich are becoming richer, and obviously now they felt that democratic governments are only working in the favor of the rich. So this gave impetus to military dictators to take over, and now people feel that dictators can bring more equality. Fourth, Africa suffers from resource curse. You can say not having resource is the element, but ability to use resource effectively to benefit of people's development is more important. And here we can see the democratic governments failed to ensure that the benefits of these resources are equally given to all sections, and that is why you can say that also weakened the democratic governments. Fifth, the democratic regimes here were, what you can say, on the backing of outside powers such as France, Britain, and USA. And you can see on the other hand, this was largely seen as what and what do you call These were all puppet governments of the Western, and that is why in some countries you can say there was a rebellion of the people because they didn't want to have these neo-colonial governments or neo-imperial governments at large. Sixth, the rise of radical groups. Rise of radical groups, especially after the Arab Spring, especially in northern part of Africa, where you have killing of Gaddafi, etc. This had given scope for new terror groups to make foundation, and this rise of radicalization has further accentuated the ethnic divisions within the society, which has led to the collapse of. So you can say, conclusion part, what the lessons we can learn from the African collapse is that across the world, democracies can only survive on two things. If the dividends of democracy is reaching out to all sections, means the governments have to have legitimacy. Strong institutions are required to ensure that democratic principles are well protected in that regard. And third one, democracy promotion will always have a kind of negative consequence. So this you can write as your conclusion. So more importantly, you have to bring the analysis. So that's what I told. If you are only always thinking about theories, what we discussed previously, forcefully trying to link those theories, it won't work out. Even if you bring J.S. Mill in your answer, try to speak out specifically now in Africa, why the collapse happened, what are the root causes of this collapse. This should have been what you have written in your answer. Okay, Purva has said that, okay, yeah, one more point what Shivani Vatt has said, there is no strong civil society in these groups, because in India, countries like India, we can say what Yogendra Yadav says, whenever there is a threat to republic, it is the public which has rescued the republic, not the opposition parties. So yes, that you can write, Shivani, as an answer. Failure of UNSC, also Rwanda crisis, even though it is old, okay. Civic culture is not democracy at present. See, don't go too theoretical always, civic culture is not. Try to give examples with Africa, like when you're speaking about what is that civic culture, what is this, that is done already, ethnic divisions of society. Purva, when you're writing your points now, when you say civic culture is not democracy as present, okay, what do you mean by that? That explanation should be there in your answer. In your mind, when you are able to link the theories, you will have to be able to integrate with the argument what you are bringing. So you should not bring blind, means just not mentioning the theory and letting it. You should be able to what? Able to link it in a systematic way. That is already done, the influence of the outside powers. That covers the geopolitical part. So any point. So this is one of the probable question that can come in the exam this year, because every year if you see they ask one question on democratic politics or on those lines, they have consistently asked questions. So if you take, there is one more question which they have asked on democracy only. Okay, look at this question. This is more of like, see, this comes under comparative politics also. How does democratic politics construct citizenship? How does democratic politics construct citizenship? This is for 10 marks, 150 words. So can we say rise of social media also impacts where democracy in more as Western? No, Shivani, that's a far-stretched point. Rise of social media or democracy is seen as a Western value. Right? These are all far-stretched points. Yeah. How does democratic politics construct citizenship? So there are two keywords here. One is democratic politics. The other is citizenship. So this was a question which has been asked in, I think, 2023 paper, last year paper. But how does democratic politics construct citizenship? So what will be the approach of you writing this answer? Or if you simplify the question, what exactly they are trying to ask? Basically, they are asking, in a democratic political system, what is the usual role of a citizen? So obviously, you can say there can be a non-democratic political system. What is their role of the citizen? Within a democratic political system, what is the role of citizen? So they are telling, how does democratic politics construct citizenship? On what basis citizenship? So here you can say the birth of a liberal democratic system also led to strengthening of the rights of the citizen. So when you say what is a democratic political system? A democratic political system, one which is based on rule of law, one where there is freedom of speech and expression, one there is existence of multiple party system, one we can say what the Lockean idea of natural rights are endowed with the people. Now you can say, how does democratic politics construct citizen? How does democracy construct citizen? One, and in a democratic political system, a citizen has what? He has certain set of fundamental rights which are well protected. Example, in a country like India. In a democratic political system, the citizen is also expected to be participatory. For example, Hannah Arendt's civic or Aristotelian civic republicanism in that regard. In a democratic political system, the citizenship is also constructed on what basis? It is based on the political equality, one man, one value, one vote. But at the same time, there are many scholars have warned that within a democracy, like people like Rousseau, they are told in a representative democratic model, the citizens are only free once in 5 years because their role is not so much. So within a democratic political system, people like J.S. Mill or people like Hannah Arendt, they believed that, sorry, not J.S. Mill, people like Hannah Arendt and Aristotle believed that what citizen should play a more active role. If citizen plays more an active role, means it's a two-way relationship. So that you need to write in your answer. So here question is simple. How does democratic politics construct citizenship? So imagine in a non-democratic political system, what is the role of a citizen? He is more passive, he is not so active. So how does democratic political system construct citizenship? India is a democratic political system. So how is the construction of citizenship? Why you will go into all that? Citizenship you write first point. Then what is a democratic? That you can only write as a conclusion or something where you can say. What you can say? Even though in a democratic politicism, that one man, one vote, all value does not work, as like Ambedkar has told, without any social economic democracy, there is no meaning to political. First tell now, how does a democratic political system construct citizenship, the concept of citizenship. Usually citizenship is based on birth, beyond in those countries. Citizens are given certain set of certain set of rights, and these rights are protected by what? These rights are protected by strong institutions in that regard. And within a democratic political system, it creates avenues for the citizen to participate in public affairs. So you can link here Hannah Arendt civic republicanism. But nevertheless, you can say what Rousseau has also what within democratic political system, citizens can be also only passive. In a representative model of democracy, where citizens only vote in elections, they don't have any other role to play. So that can be your answer. That too for what? 10 marks, only 150 words they have asked. So many times for these kind of topics, you cannot tell where it is given. You have read about democratic political system in your part A when you read democracy. You know an idea about who is a citizen. Now construct both. How does democratic politics construct citizenship? So if you take Plato's time and all, even though they were citizens of city-states, they didn't have any rights. It was all duty-oriented, right? Even in Indian kingdoms, when you had Mauryan Empire or the ancient Indian political thought, you are not citizen, you are subject. There was no civic culture, there was subject culture. But in a democratic politics, there is civic culture. So that you can write in your Answer. Yes, Satyam Tripathi, citizenship as a right, Gandhian model where citizen achieves self-sufficiency. Hennard's human rights are not involved as right of citizenship. Okay. Ambedkar said democracy means people, citizens from subject. Very good. That point is good, Shivani. Citizenship as a duty. So, see, the answer is open-ended. Within 150 words, you have to write. So, you cannot write everything. Give a structure to your answer. One angle you can speak about how democratic politics has empowered citizenship. The other angle you have to write, to preserve democratic politics, citizens also have a duty to perform. So there you can bring the angle of Rousseau or Hannah Arendt where they told, no, people will have to participate. Get a point? So give a structure to your answer. Don't just dump all the points. So when you think, that's what I told, when you think, if it is a non-democratic politic, so that's what I told, what is democratic politics? Democratic political system. What are the features of democratic political system? Rule of law, existence of multiple party systems, frequent free and fair elections, freedom of speech and expressions. So, how does a democratic politician construct citizen? It gives him certain rights. It allows them to participate in the political process. There is limitation on the powers of the state. Right? And then you also have to write, but the citizen should also actively participate. It's not only rights they enjoy, there should also certain duties they have to perform. Only then the democratic political system will also survive. That you can write, and that is why Ambedkar said, within a democratic political system, when you can say, for example, if you bring a Marxist viewpoint, let us say you bring a Marxist viewpoint in your answer. Usually Marxists are highly critical of democratic political system. They don't believe that in a democratic political system, all citizens are equal. Simple, na? Marxists don't believe in a democratic political system, all citizens are equal. So, towards the end, you can bring a Marxist critic saying that within a liberal democratic system or a democratic political system, it's a facade where you can say there is equality of one man, one vote, one value. And hence, people like Ambedkar said, unless there is social democracy, economic democracy, political democracy won't be meaningful. Getting the point? So, in these kind of questions, these are all open-ended. You have to be able to formulate the answer there. You have to be able to think. That is why I don't do brainstorming. So, when you look at these kind of questions, look at from how to approach these questions, then you will get more clarity. And yeah, scholars, it's not like part A, part B. Link scholars whom you feel their argument is valid here. For the online students, any doubt in this part? So, if you see, every year they've asked one or two questions like this. Okay, anyway, these all comes under comparative politics that we'll take up tomorrow, the last part of the syllabus. Okay, take one more question just to decipher and see. Again on democracy only. 2A. Has electoral democracy augmented the participation of people, in democratic process. So this was asked for 20 marks in 2022. Now again, if you say content and all, these answers, these questions will require to use your reserve knowledge, what you have, means what you have read till now, that you will have to use it and read. So first you need to understand the question. The key word here is what? Electoral democracy. Electoral democracy means what? A democracy where elections happen frequently and there is mechanism where people have right to vote. There is existence of multiple parties. Then they what? The electoral democracy, has it augmented? Augmented means what? Has it strengthened or enabled what? participation of people in the democratic process. So what will you write? How will you structure an answer? What is the perspectives first you can think about to bring in this question? The online students, what perspectives you can think about here? See, my answer structure I will tell. One part of my answer I will tell how it has enabled people to participate. You get my mind? Here, it's my wish, I can bring any argument. So, for example, I might bring an Indian example only, Rajni Kothari, when he says electoral politics, especially with structures like caste, it has enabled people to participate in large number, it has enabled mobilization of people, it has led to social mobility of the lower caste within India. Or you take one more argument that how the electoral democracy has participated, because many people, what Bhikkhu Parekh you have, he says that it's not always that because he's written on essay called as dialectics of elections. Okay, Bhikkhu Parekh has written an essay called as dialectics of elections. What Bhikkhu Parekh says in this essay is that he says that in an electoral democracy, which is, that's why I told why the keyword electoral democracy important. Here it is not deliberative democracy. In an electoral democracy, your role is voting in election. So for deliberative democracy, you need some type of education, some type of knowledge to participate. But as an electoral democracy, it has enabled every common man who is educated, who is not educated, etc., to express his opinion, and he also feels important. So electoral democracy has brought women, men who are educated, uneducated into the democratic process. So you can say Yogendra Yadav, he says that in elections in India is where a common man is using an alien script to express his opinion. And you can say over the years in India, the voting percentage has seen a consistent increase. That is one argument in my answer, that in what ways, through examples, electoral democracy has augmented the participation of people. But at the same time, in that regard, the electoral democracy's augmentation of participation of people is only limited to voting in elections. There have been no greater role. Rousseau, who says people in Britain are free only once in 5 years. Second one, the electoral democracy's participation will be also important if people have faith in the electoral system. So for example, you can say in especially the global north countries, etc., the people's participation has declined. Might be for two reasons. One reason might be that people are losing faith within the system, or second reason, you can say in developed countries at large, now these countries have achieved certain degree of development. So no longer people find it important to participate in the political affairs. So you have people like Hannah Arendt, who had warned that elections cannot be the only way of people's participation. People should participate in the form of what? Deliberations, discussions, etc. Or third one, as Ambedkar had said, in an electoral democracy, unless you have economic power and political power, people's participation can be also limited. Means people participating not what? Only as voters. But when you look at the Indian parliament, the reflection is what? The women representation is just 14%. So, provided the electoral democracy is fair, provided the electoral democracy has ensured that what? Bringing newer tools, referendum, plebiscite, etc., into a practical working model, then we can say it will strengthen the people's process. As Samuel Huntington has also what? Imbibed. If there are no strong institutions, the increased political participation can lead to political decay. So that you need to bring it in your answer. So this is not an easy question to answer. It is easy provided your understanding is pretty good. So question is here, keyword is electoral democracy. Has it augmented the participation of people in the democratic process? So I need to bring arguments how it has enabled. Yes, Purva, that point you can write. The crisis of legitimacy, lack of communicative action, people find it not fruitful to participate. So you're getting the point. So in this kind of, that's why I told random reading it will help, because this is there in this Bhikkhu Parekh's Dialectics of Election. It is there in the notes which I have already given to the crash course students. So there even Yogendra Yadav's Bhikkhu Parekh's viewpoint is there, and you can say Rajni Kothari has also told how the electoral politics has enabled the caste mobilization in India that enabled people to participate in large number. Yeah, you can say in electoral democracy, the role of pressure groups also becomes important. Pressure groups also plays a very key role in that regarding mobilizing people. For example, in India, farmers protests. That you can write. But make sure your answer is divided into two parts. One, you can say first part of the argument, how it has strengthened. Second part of the answer, you can say the weaknesses, where you can see in certain parts of the world, we have also seen people's participation has also seen a decline. Why it has seen a decline? And then you have to speak about what measures can be taken to ensure that people have to participate through the electoral democracy in large numbers. Understood? So this is how you can broadly divide your answer into three parts. You can bring Gandhian perspective, you can bring Hannah Arendt's perspective, you can speak about them, you can speak about Habermas, right? The idea here is that we should not see people's participation is only through electoral process. There are non-electoral process also where people should participate in the democratic process. That is my argument in the towards the end. Yes, election is one way where people can participate, but we should not see democracy only through the lens of elections. Paul Wallace is there. Democracy is not all about elections. See, that's what I told. It's not about what I am giving you, because this same question won't come. There will be a new question, it will come. So it's more about how you are able to, in your mind, make a map. Here argument is need not to return what argument I said. First part of the argument, you have to bring an argument saying that why or how electoral democracy has strengthened people's participation. That is why I gave the opinion of Bhikkhu Parekh, where he argued that what? Because of electoral democracy, where people only need to vote in elections, especially a country like India, any uneducated person also has the right to participate in the democratic process. Or Rajni Kothari, how he said, because caste as a factor, because caste mobilization happened, because now they voted as a caste bloc, this enabled increase people's participation. People were able to express their opinion through voting in the elections. Or third, how Yogendra Yadav said is that though electoral democracy was introduced by foreigners into India, but still it has enabled a common man to express his opinion. So here you can give example of increasing voting percentage in Indian elections in like 2024, 67% or 69%. But at the same time, you can say electoral process alone cannot strengthen people's participation in a democratic process. Why? Because we should not see democratic process only narrowly through terms of elections. And how in global north we can say there is a decline in voting percentage. Why there is a decline in voting percentage? Obviously, to some extent now people might have been satisfied with their social economic status. So usually who will participate in democratic voting process? It is the poor. Or secondly, you can say lack of faith in the democratic process. People voting percentage, people might not vote or might not participate. And that is what Hannah Arendt had warned, that any time of people not participating in the public affairs, their participation should not be only in terms of voting, it should be also participation in terms of deliberation, discussions, debates. So here you bring about Habermas and their argument, or Rousseau, you can say, he says that people in Britain are free only once in 5 years. And there are also challenges with respect to electoral democracy, right? For example, as Ambedkar told, people might be only participating as voters, but what about people's representation in the parliament? So that you need to bring based on what is the question they will ask in the exam. So one more year they can ask one more type of question. Um, See now one more year they have asked, explain the impact of electoral system and cleavages in shaping party system with within developing countries. This is not about democracy, it is about electoral system and its cleavages. Means in some countries they follow first past the post system, some countries they follow proportional representation, and cleavage means social divisions which are there, religion, caste, ethnicity. They are telling how it is shaping party system. Again, for these kind of questions you can make use of certain Duverger's law, Rickers theory, but again you have to give a lot of examples. Lot of examples, like in India, for example, you can say ethnicity, caste groups, how it has led to formation of caste based political parties, religion based political parties. And in India, because it is first past the post system in that regard, you can say most of the political parties here, they do not give tickets to women, because to win elections you don't need to get 51% of the vote share. So this and all you cannot mix or limit to one chapter, you have to interlink the chapter. So one, in some question they'll ask about electoral democracy, you have to have clarity about what is an electoral democracy. Then they are saying participation, okay, elections and participation, in a simple sense, have elections enabled people to participate in democracy? Yeah, to a certain extent, yes, 2 or 3 arguments. But then you can say it's very narrow to think that only through elections people can participate in a democracy. Like people like Gandhi, he spoke about what Rama Rajya, or he spoke about the idea of deliberative and participatory democracy, where people will not only participate in terms of elections, they also participate in terms of what? Day-to-day affairs. Any point? So you also have to bring reasons in your answer why elections alone cannot increase or strengthen people's participation. So that's why I told, for these kind of questions you need to understand what exactly the question is asking. It's not about how you are going to arrange, your arrangement will change according to every question they change. It's not fixed. What you can read from a book is that, okay, you can read some concepts, okay, different models of democracy, electoral democracy, participatory democracy, deliberative democracy. Or you can read about what is democratic process, okay, what is the democracy process, what is democracy? Government of the people, by the people, for the people. So what is the people's role in democracy? That understanding you need to have. And similarly, when you have read your Western political thought, you need to have idea of what Hannah Arendt spoke about, what Aristotle spoke about, or what Mill spoke about. Or if you look from a Marxist perspective, they usually see this electoral democracy as flawed. Right? Why? Because they say people not having any kind of social and economic rights, only having political rights, it only leads to what? Procedural democracy. It does not lead to any kind of substantive element of democracy. So these are all different ideas of democracy what you have, but in this question you have to limit the ideas what you have in a systematic way. So first of the argument is that how electoral democracy has enabled people's participation, 2-3 points. Second, how electoral democracy can also limit people's participation only to voting in elections. My argument will be that it should be more broader, and also give examples in some countries where you can say only conducting elections, voting percentage have declined. Why it has seen a decline? And what are the other mechanisms through which to enhance people's participation in a democratic process, non-electoral ways? That is the format of, these are all like mini essays. So you have to know how to structure your argument. Whom do you use in your answer is left to you, whose argument you are bringing or why. But if you just fill your answer with Rajni Kothari told this, Bhikkhu Parekh told that, that won't be enough. You can use them when you are bringing an argument. Purva has given the example of iron law of oligarchy in China's party. You can write, no, that is correct. In countries like China, you can say people's participation, you cannot say it can't be a measure of their democratic, because there is only one party will there vote. You're going to mind. So these are certain questions which will come. So these questions you cannot link it to say that is it contemporary theories of democracy, is it coming under comparative politics, is it belongs to party and paper one. There's no compartmentalization like that. You have to see the question, you have to use your reserve knowledge what you have, and based on that reserve knowledge, you have to be able to construct your answer. So if you start thinking here, this is a part B question, why will I use JS mill? There is nothing, nobody told JS mill should be only used in part A. That you have compartmentalized in your mind. The examiner has not, he is asking a question. Electoral democracy, has it augmented the participation of people in democratic process? You have to write, na? Similarly, the other question about human rights, so I think something they have given. Take one more question regarding, let us take these human rights, etc., these areas. Critically examine, because human rights is also one more question where they will ask here. Critically examine critically examine the notion of Asian values, the notion of Asian values in the context of ongoing debates, in the context of ongoing debates, ongoing debates on human rights. 20 marks. This was asked in 2018. Yes, Purva, you can use names of political parties AAP, ASP in your answer. It can be used. Yes, Anshul, Avasti, you can use your conclusion. That's a good conclusion. Here, now critically examine. So first of all, tell what is human rights. You can say the post the end of the Second World War, the International Convention on Human Rights was signed, and you can say today human rights has become a universal value. However, there are many debates regarding the idea of human rights. One debate is regarding, is human rights universal? Or second, many are saying that human rights is largely seen as a tool of imposition of Western values on the rest of the world. So in this regard, the proponents of Asian values, they claim that human rights should not be based on one set of values. Human rights should be based on specific cultural values of that society. So who are the proponent of the Asian values? Liu on you, and you have Mohammed bin Mahathir, the Malaysian Prime Minister. So what is their argument? What is their argument? What is their debate? What does the proponent of Asian values argue? They say the human rights, what are there? It is more of a Western value. They say Asian societies have their own set of values. For example, in Asia, duties, community, discipline, it is more valued rather than individualism. Individualism or rights, which has been part of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Their argument has been also that the human rights, what are there? They're a reflection of Christian values. They are devoid of the values of other societies such as Hindu, Arabic, or Islamic, Buddhist values. And even proponents of Luke on you, they believe that what democracy might not be compatible with Asian societies, and they say there need not to be promotion of democracy for promotion of human rights. So that is their argument. So there is their argument has been human rights has been used as a tool by the Western countries to impose their cultural values on Asian societies. But then you have to bring counter argument saying that, however, one, it would be wrong to be considered that the current universal declaration of human rights, it is incorrect to say that it only reflects Christian values, because when the universal declaration of human rights was framed, they held consultations with Gandhi, Confucian philosophy has been also included. So it is more based on Western philosophy rather than Western culture. Second one, it is also wrong on, we can also disagree with the proponents of Asian values that who say that there is no universal set of values. We can say across societies there are certain values which are universal, such as rights, compassion, etc. These are across all cultures and communities. And third, you can say people like Amartya Sen have countered the Asian proponents, saying that in order to legitimize their despotic rule, that these scholars like Liu Kuan-yew critiqued the idea of human rights. And you have Susan Molar-Okin, who is against the idea of saying that bringing human rights with culture's specificity, because in most of the cultural angle, the women are what? Exploited or discriminated against. So for example, the forced genital mutilation in African society, the practice of sati in India. Okay. So then you have to go into the conclusion saying that, like what Pratap Bhanu Mehta brings an argument that human rights can be inclusive of different cultural values as long as those cultural values pass the test of equality and human dignity. So long as they pass the test of equality and human dignity. So this is how you can frame your answer. So if first bring the argument of the Asian values proponents, why they are criticizing, then you have to bring their criticism, that what are the faults in their arguments. Then you have to bring a synthesis saying that yes, the human rights should also include other values, but as Pratap Bhanu Mehta brings an argument saying that as long as these values pass the test of equality as well as human dignity. So that can be part of your answer. So these are usually the questions which are asked in the exam based on multiculturalism thing or human rights. Or sometimes they might ask a direct question saying that is human rights a tool to violate sovereignty, or the relation between sovereignty and human rights. Same arguments again you can bring it here. So that's why I told here, it's not about again how much you know, it is how well organized your thought process is, how much clarity you bring in your answer in the arguments, and that is why reading the question, deciphering the question is very, very important. Yeah, content part, as I told, what content you have read in your notes, whatever notes you have read, that will be more than sufficient to write a good answer here. So I can say these are the question again which they have asked in regarding this human rights thing in the exam. Largely they are asked from multicultural perspective, cultural relativist perspective. So next we'll do with two other things, that is gender and climate change. Some questions on gender and some questions on climate change. Then we'll go into bit of part B, that is Indian foreign policy. Because again European Union, NATO, this will try to do with Indian foreign policy together. So we'll take a 10 minutes break. It is 12 o'clock. We'll again start at 12:15. So for the online students, we'll have a break of 15 minutes. So it is 12:15 again we'll start. We'll start with gender and climate change questions. Then we'll go into Indian foreign policy. Again the content part has been already uploaded for some part. For some parts it will be uploaded again on the group. Okay, now we'll continue with the questions on climate change, gender justice. So let us look into what questions they have been asked. So regarding climate change, I think you can take down some important content that will be required. Okay, so this content you can just take down randomly. So this we can make use of our questions. This is not only for part A, this is both part A and part B. Part A means they basically ask the debates and issues between global north and global south regarding climate change negotiations. So you can say COP 26, 27, 28 will become important. Or in part B, they'll ask what is India's stand on climate. That is very easy to write because you can have only three important principles: CBDR, climate justice, historical responsibility, and what India has done with regarding. So just take down these random points. This will be useful for you to answer the questions on climate change. So one you take down India and COP 26. India and COP 26. So COP 26 is where did it held? Glasgow. Okay. So here you take down that India made a commitment in Glasgow that is called as Panch Amrit. Panch Amrit. So Panch Amrit basically means five proposals what India gave or five commitments what India gave. So one was what? To generate 500 gigawatts of non-fossil energy, non-fossil energy capacity by 2030. Then you have second one, 50% of its energy requirements, 50% of its energy requirements from renewable energy, by 2030. Third, reduction of carbon emission by 1 million tons by 2030. Reduction of carbon emission by 1 million tons by 2030. Then fourth one, to reduce carbon intensity, of the economy by 45% by 2030. And more importantly, what India did, it also gave a commitment for net zero. What is the year? 2070. Net zero by 2070. Okay, so these are the five proposals. Then you also have to know what are other India's demands which has been there. One you take down, India has highlighted the importance India has highlighted the importance of transfer of climate finance, the keyword climate finance, and low cost climate technologies, to developing countries. Low cost climate technologies to developing countries. Then demand for UNFCCC to track climate finance, and they have also articulated this initiative called as lifestyle for environment, LIFE, lifestyle for environment. Where India has argued that the world needs to be mindful, where India has argued that the world needs to be mindful and deliberate utilization mindful and deliberate utilization instead of mindless and destructive consumption, So one more thing what you have to remember here is that there might be certain questions where they ask that in part B, that what is the comment, the influence of the Indian philosophy on India's foreign policy. So I can say the Gandhian philosophy of simple living, or you can say criticism, mindless material thing, or you can say he's influenced by this Edward Carpenter book, Criticism of Modern Medicine, and Small is that Schumacher's book, what is that, Small is Beautiful. So these can be connected when you write your answer, saying that how India's position in climate change is influenced by his philosophical mindset. Okay. Then you take down India's overall approach emphasizes on India's overall approach to climate change. It emphasizes on the following principles, that is equity, CBDR, that is what, common but differentiated responsibilities, respective capabilities, and the idea of climate justice. Then you can also say that according to Harsh V. Pant, India's commitments at Glasgow, according to Harsh V. Pant, India's commitment at Glasgow was more aggressive than it was in 2015. It was more aggressive in 2015. In 2015, it was INDC, intended nationally determined contribution. It was more aggressive. And then you take down, means these are all unstructured. Okay, these are not structured, just unstructured. You have to be able to use them depending upon the question. Currently, India is the third largest carbon dioxide emitter. Currently, India is the third largest carbon dioxide emitter, and it accounts to 7% of global emission. Who are the first and second? China and US. Next point means data. Make use of this data in any question you are asking on. Next to diagram. According to International Energy Agency, in their report, the World Energy Outlook report, World Energy Outlook report 2021, that India's emissions are not expected to peak, according to International Energy Agency, World Energy Outlook Report 2021, India's emissions are not expected to peak in the next 3 decades. And the global emission is expected to rise to 11%. by 2050, global emission is required to rise to 2050. Then next point, these are all your understanding, these are all not structured. You have to make use of when you feel what question is demanding. So if you look at India's approach has been also to climate change negotiations, they are trying to align with like-minded countries. They formed a group called as like-minded countries. So take note, India has called upon the groups such as the like-minded developing countries, LMDCs, like-minded developing countries, like-minded developing countries to work together, to work together to preserve and strengthen, to preserve and strengthen the interest of developing countries, interest of developing countries or the global south, in global climate change negotiations, global climate change negotiations, climate change negotiations, and has demanded 1 trillion, climate finance, and urging that, means what India is trying to say is that in 2009 they had made a commitment. They are saying that is different now. It has increased. Inflation has to be taken into account, and urging that the support to developing countries that was decided in 2009, the support to developing countries that was decided in 2009 will not be adequate. To meet the climate goals, will not be adequate to meet the climate goals. See, this is one thing, okay. There is one more approach you can also see, that the one more approach is that it's not that only we are working with developing countries, we are also working with developed world. So for example, International Solar Alliance, which has been partnership with France. So take note. At the same time, India is also cooperating with the developed world. India is also cooperating with the developed world. Now India is what it is projecting is that they are telling that India is not the game spoiler, but India is acting as a bridge between the global north and global south. So India is also cooperating with developed countries. For example, India and UK have launched the Green Grid Initiative. India, France have launched what? The International Solar Alliance. International Solar Alliance. So today you can see the multi-alignment is also reflected in our climate change negotiations also. It's not only global south, it is also global north, and within global south we are also aligning with the small island countries. So take note, India is also leading the infrastructure for Resilient Highland Initiative. Resilient Highland Initiative, IFRII. Infrastructure for Resilient Highland Initiative, with a vision of helping small highland developing states, helping small island developing states with regards to tackling floods and cyclones. tackling floods and cyclones. Floods and cyclones. And then you take down the Niti Aayog report says, Niti Aayog report says, we have given that 5 Glasgow commitments, right, to achieve these goals. The Niti Aayog report says, to achieve the above targets, India will require to focus on 3 areas. India's will have to require on focusing on 3 areas. One, increasing its renewable energy capacity. Increasing its renewable energy capacity. Second one, decarbonizing carbon emission intensive sectors. Carbon emission intensive sectors. Decarbonizing carbon emission intensive sector. Third one, creating more carbon sinks. Creating more carbon sinks. More carbon sinks. And Niti Aayog also said that India needs investments to achieve this. It needs investments around 4.5 trillion. 4.5 trillion to meet its infrastructure gap. To need its infrastructure gap. And they have also said private sector should also play a key role. Private sector should also play a key role in this regard. And also we have to build partnership with and link with local communities. Partnership and link with local communities. And you can also say that at COP 28, India stressed on what? It stressed on that word coal phase out. They told instead of it be phase down. Okay, so take down India along with China. India along with China. India along with China pressurized for the use of word phase down instead of phase out for coal. They pressurized for the use of phase down instead of phase out. For coal. So now the reason is that India is the second largest reserves of fourth largest reserve of coal and second largest coal producer, and you can say even for a very long time India will depend upon its coal energy. So it will compromise on India's, because a lot of people are dependent on coal sector. So they have to bring a balance between its international commitments and national commitments. And then you take down. See, most of the points are there. They can ask a question saying that India is a climate leader, comment. So there you have to be able to write the initiatives. So initiatives, most of you have taken on LIFE initiative, formation of this LMDC, Panchamrit, International Solar Alliance, Coalition for Disaster Resilience and Infrastructure, Green Grid Initiative, Equity and Climate Justice in that regard. Then you take down one more thing is that Biofuel Alliance, which they formed in G20 summit. Biofuel Alliance. India is also part of this Mangrove Alliance for climate change. Okay, then you take down a quote which is there, which you can use in introduction or in conclusions, etc. This quote is given by Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, at COP 26. Antonio Guterres. Guterres. It is time to go into emergency mode. It is the time to go into emergency mode. It is time to go into emergency mode, or our chance of reaching net zero, or our chance of reaching net zero will itself be zero. Our chance of reaching net zero will itself be zero. This is one of the quote you can use. Then you have Barry Boozan. These are all random, you have to know how to use it. Barry Boozan. He says that political discourse needs to securitize environment. Political discourse needs to securitize environment. Means what? Why today environment is not seen as a important issue? Because they have not made it. Means what Barry Boozan told, security is what you give importance to, what you speak. So you can use that political discourse, means you can use it in conclusions today, that you can say today climate change is very important. As Barry Boozan has said, the political discourse needs to securitize environment. Then you have King who says climate change represents a more significant threat than terrorism. Climate change represents a more significant threat than terrorism. And at COP27, what was the other achievement they were able to bring? The loss and damage funds were agreed upon. Loss and damage funds were agreed upon. And at COP28, India has formed the Green Credit Initiative. Green Credit Initiative. It's a platform for what? Innovative environmental programs and instruments. Green Credit Initiative, a platform for innovative environmental programs and instruments. And India also led the Global River Cities Alliance. India also led the Global River Cities Alliance, which is an important initiative for river management. Which is an important initiative for river management. Which is an important initiative for river management. So these are the basic content that you can know to answer questions on what the climate change or India's stand on climate change issues as part of its foreign policy. Now let's look into some questions to answer. So take down, this question has been asked in 2021. Discuss the 5 proposals made by India. Discuss the 5 proposals. 5 proposals made by India in the recent COP26 conference. In the recent COP26 conference held at Glasgow. 10 marks, 150 words. 10 marks, 150 words. How will you answer? How will you answer this question? Hmm? So what will you write as an introduction? Why will you write about conference of parties? So write the introduction about the statement by King, who said that climate change is a bigger threat today than terrorism. And then you can say, in this regard, at COP26, India is projecting itself as a leader of climate justice. And India made 5 commitments, that is Panchamrit. So write about the 5 commitments. But question is not about what are the 5 proposals. The question is discuss the 5 proposals. So once you write the 5 proposals, or you can just use a circle and indicates the 5 proposals, then you write about what? Then what will you write later? You wrote about the 5 proposals, then what will you write? So one, you can say India's commitment is on what? It's based on its important stand, saying that common but differentiated responsibilities. Second, most importantly, India has given a commitment now to say that we are able to take greater responsibility. For example, we have given net zero emission by 2070. But at the same time, you can say that there are challenges in achieving these goals, and the Niti Aayog report, what you told, that what will India have to do? Concentrate on 3 things. One, capacity building that needs investments, and for these to happen, the global north will also have to devolve funds. For this, India, along with countries like China or global south, should ensure that the climate finance will be transferred, or necessary technologies will be transferred, which will help India to meet its target. So here in the question, you will speak about India as a climate leader, and also one short paragraph about what are the challenges that are there with respect to the commitments what we have made. Not so much is not required. 5 proposals they have given. They are asking you to discuss these 5 proposals. So obviously you wrote about what are the 5 proposals. Then you can say these proposals reflect that India today is ready to take up the leadership role. Today India has made a huge shift. What is a huge shift? In COP25 they are not agreed for net zero emission. Today they have given that commitment. At the same time, India is also asking for what? To achieve these goals, there should be transfer of fund and technology. At the same time, Niti Aayog report also says that India should need investment, should build more emphasis on interaction with local community. Provided this, you can say India can now, what you can say, project itself as a leader of the global south when it comes to climate change negotiations. So question is not about what are the proposals, the question here is about discuss. So you need to make a small comment on what is this, what you make out of these 5 proposals. So it reflects that India is today making a commitment. It is also making sure that India is projecting itself to be a climate leader. It's not only demanding, it is also taking initiatives. And at the same time, you also have to say that to achieve these goals, there should be also transfer of fund from the global north, that is climate finance, and transfer of technologies. And again, as the Niti Aayog report also highlights, it requires 4.5 trillion funds for Indian government to achieve these targets. So India is balancing between its developmental needs as well as its commitments what it has made, something like that. So if you just write the proposal, you won't get complete marks, because question is not what, question is discuss. So that you will have to write. You can add that. Aggressive, they have taken more now aggressive. They're demanding that it is not that individually countries can do on their own. They're asking commitments from the developed world. That you can include, that you can bring. They have enhanced. So India is not just making now demanding, India is also making commitments. Others also, and we are also ready to make the commitments. So you should bring your analysis on the paper. If you just write the 5 proposals, that is not enough. They are not asking what is India's commitment. They are asking discuss the 5 proposals. What you can say made by India in the recent COP conference held in Glasgow. That we will have to answer. So that's why I told many times you have to look at the question pretty carefully to understand what exactly they are asking. If you understand that, then you will know how to write. But if you have just written about the 5 proposals, that would not be sufficient. It won't be enough. So again, you can take down one more question. This is for part A. Take down the question as, would you agree? Would you agree that the ongoing debates on international environmental politics, international environmental politics continue to be marred by a new north-south ideological divide, over historical responsibility and developmental model, illustrate your answer with suitable examples. Illustrate your answer with suitable examples. So this is the question that they have asked. So what if we don't remember the 5 points? See, if you don't remember the Glasgow 5 proposal, at least you have to write some. But 5 it's required to remember. Why? Because if to comment on it, first of all, you have to tell what are the 5 proposals. Then you are able to discuss. Okay. So you can tell why they have given 2070 as carbon emission. Why not 2030, 2040? Because India is seeking time to move towards a decarbonized economy. Why? Because there, as I told you, you can bring their point that India's population is dependent on coal. So for that is why you have to mention the 5 principles. In that 5 principles, you can tell that you can discuss that why India has made these commitments. So you will have to know the 5 proposals. Yes. Now, how will you answer this question? Would you agree that the ongoing debates on international environmental politics continue to be marred by a new north-south ideological divide over historical responsibility and developmental model? Illustrate your answer with suitable examples. How will you address this question? The keywords. What are the keywords in the question? The ongoing debates. On international environmental politics. And they are saying it is continued to be marred by the new north-south ideological divide. So what is this new north-south ideological divide? Over historical responsibility and developmental model. So obviously they are asking in the question saying that the international environmental politics which is there, that is the negotiations what is happening, Paris climate change or COP 26, 27, 28. They are telling there are problems here. Why there is problems here? Because there is growing differences between the global north and the global south over what? Over the issue of historical responsibility and developmental model. So first part you have to understand, you have to bring in your answers through examples. What are those issues? One, there is issue over historical responsibility. Now you have to bring, what is the claim of the global south countries? They are saying that because the global north countries industrialized first, they released all the carbon emission. Now coming and demanding that everybody should take equal responsibility, they are claiming that it violates the principle of equity, it violates the idea of climate justice. Developmental model. So Western countries largely followed a capitalistic model of development, materialistic model of development, and their lifestyle led to what? Greater consumption effects. And that is why they are telling if the development was based on Gandhian model, etc., it would have been more sustainable. So there is a divide over that, and they say because of these costly lifestyles in the West, now who is paying the price? They are telling the price is being paid by developing all global south countries. Or the other argument is that global north countries have shifted many of their polluting industries in the name of globalization toward global south countries, and now global south countries are asking what? Because you have what is that, offloaded these industries into global south, it is making more difficult for global south countries to balance development and as well as their climate change thing. So they are asking what? They are asking that there should be greater transfer of funds. They are asking what? To greater extent that these countries will have to think. For you can say differences over this. When Trump was the president, he brought America out of Paris climate change agreement. And again you can say both countries came into conflict, both sides came into conflict in the recent COP 27 over the use of what? Phase down and phase out. And there is also dispute between them regarding what? Climate, what is that? Adaptation and mitigation. For example, global north is saying that we have met the $100 billion funds what we have promised under green climate fund, but the global south countries are telling that what? They are telling that you have only focused on mitigation, you are not focusing on adaptation. And the global south analysts have also said that what? The funds that has been transferred, they are in more form of loans from private companies, it is not from transfer from the state. So these issues have cropped up, and that is why you can say in a way there has been some problem with global climate. But at the same time, it would be wrong to say that there is complete breakdown of talks in that regard. There has been also cooperation between the global north and global south. Now you bring about India's cooperation with Solar Alliance, this Green Grid initiative, and in recently they were also they came to an agreement with loss and damage payments with COP 27 which is there. And recently there also the global north countries agreed to remove the word phase down and to bring phase out. And we can also say that now the global north countries have agreed that countries like India and China can have a longer time to phase out. Or Kigali agreement is an example where you can say there is a different cutoff date for China, India and the western and global north countries. So you can say that differences are bound to there, but it is very important for the countries to realize that what, as that Antonio Guterres statement is there, the time is running out. What is that? What is the statement? It is time to get into the emergency mode or chance of reaching net zero will become zero. That you can use as your conclusion. So that's why I told, if you understand the question pretty well, it becomes very easy to structure an answer, and here you don't need any scholars and all. It's more importantly, I have to bring dimensions in my answers. That's what I brought dimension, or why there is dispute between, and give examples. Paris Climate Change Agreement, okay, when the talks were called off, or you can say America pushed out of Paris Climate Change Agreement. Reluctance of the developed countries to transfer funds under Green Climate Fund, that is 100 billion. Like Trump had demanded that this is nothing but a way of extracting the benefits. Or global South countries saying that what historical responsibility has remained, who released carbon emission. So India, in terms of emission per capita, India is one of the lowest emitting countries in the world. So that is also has been a dispute, that you have to take per capita emission, not the holistic emission. So if you have read 1, 2 or 3 editorial pages on climate change, you will be able to write a very good answer. But again, your answer has to be well structured. And again, they have told, give examples. I have given an example of International Solar Alliance, International Green Grid Initiative, or loss and damage which has been agreed. So at the same time, it's also not that the debate has led to failure of talks. So conclusion will be what? I'll use the statement of Antonio Guterres as my conclusion. So most of the questions what you have seen will be oriented this way itself, whatever they ask about climate change. But again, you have to understand the statement of the question, from what perspective they ask the statement. Then you will be also have to be able to articulate point. Or if you can mention here also the international NGOs which are there, they are playing also a key role to build a bridge between the global north and global south. Simple now, if you look at the question, then you can ask a direct question. India's role today in global climate change negotiations. My conclusion will be, India is playing the role of what? It is acting as a bridge between the global north and the global south. Points I would have written in my answer. My conclusion I am going to end on it. Any point? So any kind of climate change question, these keywords what we discussed. The other keyword is there, shallow ecology, deep ecology. That all you depends upon what question you answer. So when you write about environmental movements in India, you can say most of the environmental movements in India are based on shallow ecology. They are not based on deep ecology. What do you mean by that? So in a shallow ecology, the most important importance is given to development. Deep ecology, more importance is given to environment as a whole. So most of the global north countries are going for what? Deep ecology. Global south countries have to bring a balance. They are going for shallow ecology. So that is also one of the source of conflict between the divide between the global north and global south. See, same thing only. New means now what are the new developments? What are fighting over what? I intended nationally determined contribution, or this loss and damage, green climate fund. Debate is same. Arguments are different now. They are telling why they have to think. So you have to, through examples, give what is the differences or what they have. But at the same time, it's not true that it's completely that the debate has only continued. There has been also some kind of cooperation and collaboration between the global north and global south. For that also you have to give examples. So any doubt in this part? See, many questions are, if you know the concept well, it is only approach what you have to know. See, one more question what they asked in 2015 is that the struggle for democracy has been marked by bitter strife and tribulations. Examine this statement in cases of Pakistan, Nepal and Myanmar. So, same answer when you will write, you have to use the same concept, but you have to tell, in Pakistan, why democracy has not stabilized, overdeveloped state, the role of military having a state. In Nepal, ethnic differences in that regard. Again, in Myanmar, it is the role of the military, So you have to give examples taking these as a reason that why democracy has not settled in these countries. You can use the same concept, what you can say, J.S. Milka argument or others, but you have to be specific with respect to Pakistan, Nepal and Myanmar. So again, you can say that feminist approach to international politics is biased, which we have already discussed. Why it is biased and in what ways. See again, examine the main problems and challenges involved in looking after environmental concern in world politics. What are the main problems and challenges involved in looking after the environmental concerns in world politics? Obviously, one major problem is the divide between global north and global south. The other major problem in many countries, as Barry Buzan says, environment has not been securitarized. It is low politics, is not seen as high politics. Third one, you can say funding is one problem. Mitigation, adoption, technology transfer is another problem. Fourth one, uh, sovereignty continues to be predominant. So any country can walk out of the agreement at any point of time. Balancing development and their environmental needs is another challenge. You have to give examples. Here again, don't think about which theory shall I write. Answer the question. Try to use the keywords, concepts, what you know. Okay, give an assessment of the feminist critique of contemporary global issues. How will you write this question? Give an assessment. Give an assessment of feminist critique of contemporary global issues. This they asked for 10 marks in 2017. How will you address, what will be your approach to answering this question? Or what is the keywords in the question that you will have to focus on? One keyword is contemporary global issues. So what are the contemporary global issues? It will be terrorism, climate change, the ongoing conflicts, globalization. So you can't write more here because it's a 10 marker question. You have to write within how many words? You have to write within 150 words. So one, you can introduce your answer with feminism. Feminism is one of the critical theories of international politics. Then you can say the feminist approach gives a different or subaltern perspective on global issues. For example, their critique is what terrorism impacts more of women and children in that regard. So for example, ISIS has developed sex slaves in that regard. Similarly, you can say climate change, it has more impact on women. For example, in Africa and India, women have to travel long distances to fetch water. They are also critical of conflicts, as Barbara says that men make war because war makes them men. They will also be highly critical of lack of democratization of international institutions. Why? Because it lacks women representation and they have been not responsive to women issues. For example, UN was silent on the Rwanda genocide where a lot of women were raped. So, feminist critique has ensured that today that gender related issues are becoming an important part of the political discourse. They have re-altered the idea of security from territorial security to human security. But nevertheless, the neorealists, however, claim that certain times the feminist critique is biased because they argue that gender alone can change how the global politics functions. But according to Kenneth Waltz, it is the structure that is responsible for the behavior of nation states and not gender. But nevertheless, the feminist critique has today made a world more inclusive and more focused on women related issues. Because it's a 150 marker, then you can't explain anything in detail. If they given a 20 marker, then you take one issue and explain what is their critique and how it has, what changes have been brought. Okay. You can make use of some examples, some scholars like J. N. Tickner, Cynthia Enlow. Understood? So, okay, needs of ethics of care, feminine values promote conservation and preservation. Yes, you can write. War, terrorism, environmental change, cyber. 20% of women dependents included to increase conclusion. Yes, you can do that. Same is simple. You first decipher the question correctly. Keyword is contemporary global issues. Have you linked that in your answer? Then okay, what is their given assessment? Means what do you think about their critic? Obviously, their critic has made a positive impact. Then conclude your answer by being prescriptive. Your answer will be done. So that's why I told for gender and all, look for dimensions. Okay, feminism, scholars, Cynthia Enlow, J. N. Tickner, Catherine Moon, militarized prostitution, globalization, human trafficking, sex trafficking, Thailand, emergence of a sex tourist place, Marxist feminists, their critique of capitalistic structure of the global economy, or you can link post-colonial feminists Chandra Mohanty and Uma Chakravarti, who speaks about the experiences of women in third world countries, non-inclusion of women in international institutions. UN itself does not have a woman secretary general till today. So, but again the same point, positive angle you think about. Right now, how globalization has also enabled global civil society, new employment opportunity for men, new values have entered third world countries. So these and all you cannot just prepare like a notes. It should like random things what you have to be able to analyze and write an answer. That's why I told these are all like essay topics. You can use any content to link your answer. But that's what the skill here matters and how you write. It's easy to discuss, but when you start writing, then the problem will happen. Why the problem will happen? You have to know how to articulate correctly. The keywords should be known. The link should be correct. For this, what you'll have to do is practice questions. Take up practice questions. So like take up one question, you might take 20 minutes to write. It's okay. First try to brainstorm and structure. Once you get a hold, next you try to reduce the time and write one more question on the same area. So if you practice 3-4 questions on the same topic where you feel it is difficult for you to answer, it will make more life simpler for you. Getting the point? So any doubt you have in this part? Now these are largely the part A questions. Now we are remaining with what? Largely comparative politics and part B, that is Indian foreign policy. Indian foreign policy is very easy to answer. Here you don't need to study everything. Here if you say in part B, one, you have certain areas where questions have consistently come. One, the determinants of Indian foreign policy. So obviously you have history, geography, philosophy, science and technology, so society, everything, and political structure, etc. Then you have continuity and changes in Indian foreign policy. So broadly we have to know what is the continuity, what is the changes, keywords, points. Then you will also have to know the what you can say, the institutions which are involved in foreign policy making. So Ministry of External Affairs, you have think tanks, Parliament, National Security Advisor or National Security Council. They might ask for another question here. Then questions have largely come on the areas where you can say South Asia. This is one pakka question they asked every year, and largely they ask South Asia why it has not integrated, etc. So obviously you have to know the reasons for failure of SAARC, and also you can say today India is looking at alternative platforms such as BIMSTEC, Mekong Ganga cooperation, and also our IOR ARC. Then you also have to know India's Indo-Pacific strategy or policy here. So this will brings us to know about Quad, AUKUS. Okay, here you don't worry too much about scholars and all. You have to be good in analysis. Okay, 1 or 2 introductions, conclusions you can pre-prepare. And then you will also have, they can ask questions on look east, act east, policy. Again, you have to know the analysis here. What is look east? Why look east was brought, and why there is shift from look east to act east? Okay, what is the difference between look east and act east? Then you can again connect act east policy and look east policy with India's ASEAN relations, etc., etc. Then you will also have to have an idea about India's tools of soft power. So their questions will come there also. So you have tools of soft power is culture, religion, Bollywood, medical tourism. You have this Indian Council of Cultural Relations, and what is that? One more agency is there now. ITEC, International Technical Economic Cooperation, which they offer education, science, technology to weaker countries, and you can say economic incentives what they offer India. So again, in culture you can bring Buddhism, Bollywood, etc. Other things can be also brought about. Tools of India. So questions have come in this way. And then you will have to know about specifically India's relation with Afghanistan. This becomes important. Return back of Taliban. Pakistan questions are rare, but still they can ask about terrorism in Pakistan, or sometimes a mixed question until like India-Pakistan conflict through nuclear deterrence concept they've asked. China, again, certain important issue, BRI project, the Brahmaputra river dispute, or growing border incursions on Chinese side. So again, we have to look into questions. We have to solve more questions. If we have solved more questions, we will know what content we can bring here. US and Russia is also very important in the current thing. Israel is one more thing which becomes very important because India has dehyphenated policies with Israel. Japan is a new country which is increasingly becoming important in India's foreign policy scheme of things in that regard. And regions, they might ask West Asia, Africa. Africa is one, many times questions have come, and Central Asia. So for part B, it's not that you have a fixed content. You have to have a very good analytical bent of mind, and you need to have a way of writing. So you can have pre-prepared introductions and conclusions. I don't know. For US, most of the questions, my conclusion is fixed. The future of Indo-American relationship will depend upon to what extent the Americans can accommodate India's interest in their larger geopolitical strategy. Japan, it is fixed. As Shinzo Abe in his book Utkushi Kuni says that a strong Japan is good for India, a strong India is good for Japan, a strong Indo-Japan relation is good for Asia. Or if it is Israel question, it is fixed conclusion. What is that? There is no other example than India and Israel where the relation between two countries have blossomed as quickly as in last 2 decades. Allow figure like Afghanistan, fixed. Afghanistan serves as a litmus test for India to emerge as a regional or a global power. Again a point. Or with respect to India and Russia, as Srinath Raghavan says that both India and Russia should be matured enough to understand that the recent divergence in the relationship is not based on new partners. It is based on changing geopolitical realities. So for these kind of things, you have to write answers and you have to read articles. So I will share a list of articles also for India, Russia, India, Japan. Don't need to go through all of them. Just go through one of them. They'll give you a lot of ideas on how you can write. So in tomorrow's class, we'll take up questions in these areas. BRICS, IPSA. We'll see the question because here you don't need to read so much. You have to know how to analyze. So we'll take up questions, and keywords are very important. Bringing more number of keywords. So don't blindly write Harsh V. Pant is telling this, Raja Mohan is telling that. You can use that as a substantiation. But you need to bring analysis. So any kind of analysis, any kind of bilateral relation, you have to look through these aspects. History. the geographical significance, strategical dimension, defense, technology, cultural, maritime, trade, border, multilateral platforms. You're getting a point. So if you look at these angles, you will get points there itself. So have 1 or 2 page notes, that's it, not detailed notes, and have certain prefixed theoretical linkages. Like if it is India Pakistan, link zero sum game. Right, Shashi Tharoor in his book Pax Indica calls India and Pakistan as what? Brother enemies. Like that, in introduction and conclusion you can use it. Or you can say India-China's relationship is largely seen through complex interdependence, or Napoleon Bonaparte that China is in her slumber. Once she wakes up, she'll wake the world. But later you need to bring the analysis in that point. You're getting a point. In certain questions like Afghanistan, you can bring heartland theory, saying that Afghanistan is the graveyard of empires. Yeah, when you're writing about China and water dispute, etc., use Brahma Chelani's book. She calls China as a hydro hegemon. So these kind of technical terms will be helpful in bringing your analysis. So tomorrow will be probably the final class where we'll try to discuss part B and try to accommodate comparative politics also. Comparative politics is a small topic where party system, pressure groups, social movements, which we have also discussed when we did paper 1 part B. So most of that content can be used here, but still I'll just go through political economy, political modernization, political development, etc. But largely tomorrow we'll start with bilateral relations. We'll take up questions. Okay, we'll try to solve questions in that regard, and also some new areas like India, Africa will become important. So I'll also give 1 page notes for most of these things that you can work. Okay. So tomorrow class timings will be again evening, that is 5:30 to 8:30.